Okay, let's dive in. Think about a place that's just steeped in legend. The Bermuda Triangle.
Right. Instantly, you think ships vanishing, planes disappearing, that whole thing.
Exactly. Or, the Devil's Triangle, as some call it. It's this spot in the western North Atlantic that's just captured our imagination for ages.
And geographically, we're talking roughly that area between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. It's become, well, synonymous with mysteries nobody can quite solve.
Yeah, and you can see why people are curious. It's one of the great modern mysteries.
Absolutely.
So that's our plan today. We've got a bunch of sources, and we really want to dig into this, explore the theories, from the wild stuff to the more scientific angles, see what actually holds water.
Yeah, we'll look at everything. I mean, you hear about supernatural vortexes, aliens even, but then there are explanations like just bad weather or strange ocean currents, maybe geographical quirks.
It's a whole spectrum.
It really is. We're trying to get a handle on it.
Okay, so the name itself, Bermuda Triangle. It sounds old, like sailor lore, but it's actually not that old.
That's right. I mean, people told stories about weird stuff happening there before, but the actual name, it really caught on in 1964. Vincent Gaddis wrote an article.
In Argosy magazine, yeah. And he linked it to a specific event, didn't he? Which I guess brings us to the big one.
Flight 19 has to be. December 1945. This is probably the cornerstone of the whole legend.
5 Navy torpedo bombers. Just a training mission, supposed to be routine.
Supposed to be. And it just went completely wrong. They vanished.
And the really chilling part, they sent out a search plane.
Which also vanished. That's what makes it so profoundly disturbing. It wasn't just one incident.
So how many people are we talking total?
You had 14 men on Flight 19 itself, and then another 13 on the search plane, the Martin Mariner. So 27 people lost in one event. Huge loss.
And the official Navy line was, WIDA, navigational problems. Ran out of fuel.
Pretty much, yeah. Navigational error by the flight leader, disorientation, ultimately running out of fuel and ditching in rough seas. That was the official finding.
But you mentioned people weren't really buying it. Why not?
Yeah.
What felt off?
Well, a few things. These weren't rookies, first off. Experienced crew.
Okay.
But maybe more than that, those last radio messages from Lieutenant Taylor, the leader.
Yeah, what do they say?
Things like, we don't know which way is west, and everything looks strange, even the ocean. That just doesn't sound like someone who's merely lost. It sounds fundamentally wrong.
Like reality itself was skewed for them somehow. And there were reports of compasses going haywire, too.
Exactly. Compass malfunctions were reported. If your main instruments are failing you, especially back then, well, you're in deep trouble. It adds this really unsettling layer.
And the fact that no wreckage was ever found. Not for Flight 19. Not for the search plane. 0.
That's absolutely key. I mean, okay, the Atlantic is vast, it's deep, finding wreckage is hard, but nothing. For 6 planes, that complete absence of debris is a huge part of what keeps the mystery alive. It feels incomplete, impossible almost.
So Flight 19 really lit the fuse on the modern legend. But this area had a reputation before that, right? Like the USS Cyclops, way back in 1918.
Oh, absolutely. The Cyclops is a massive case in itself. Literally massive.
Where are we talking?
Huge Navy cargo ship, over 500 feet long, carrying more than 300 people and like 10,000 tons of manganese ore. Just vanished.
Vanished. No SOS, no distress signal.
Not a peep, nothing. A ship that size gone without a trace, no debris, no lifeboats, nothing ever found.
That's hard to fathom, especially with that many people on board.
It really is. Back then, World War I was on, so people wondered about German U-boats.
Makes sense.
But Germany denied it, and honestly, no U-boat claimed credit, which they usually would, and still no wreckage. Ever for something that large.
The Navy itself called it one of its most baffling mysteries, didn't they?
They did. The official Navy statement basically said its disappearance was one of the most baffling mysteries in the annals of the Navy. When the authorities admit they're stumped, that really cements it in the public mind.
Okay, so Cyclops, Flight 19. Then there were those British airliners in the late 40s, Star Tiger and Star Ariel.
Right, yeah. British South American Airways, these add another layer because they were passenger planes.
What happened there? Similar circumstances.
Very similar in outcome.
Yeah.
Star Tiger disappeared in January 48, flying from the Azores to Bermuda. Star Ariel vanished almost exactly a year later, January 49, flying from Bermuda to Jamaica.
Experienced crews again. Good weather.
Yep, both had seasoned crews, weather conditions reported as good.
And again, no distress calls, no wreckage.
Exactly, just gone. Poof. Happening so close together after Flight 19, it really started to feel like a pattern, like something genuinely weird was happening in that specific stretch of ocean. It made people ask, what else could it be besides just accidents?
Right. Okay, so we've got these core incidents that really built the legend. Let's shift into the explanations people have come up with. There's a whole range from scientific attempts to, well, other stuff.
For sure.
How about the methane gas theory? That one gets mentioned a lot.
Yeah, the methane hydrates idea, it's scientifically interesting. The basic concept is you have these pockets of frozen methane on the seabed.
Okay.
If they destabilize, maybe due to seismic activity or warming, they could release huge bubbles of methane gas that shoot up to the surface.
I'm over that too.
Well, the theory is this massive upwelling of gas could suddenly drastically lower the density of the water above it.
So a ship floating there would just lose buoyancy.
Instantly. It could sink incredibly fast, maybe too fast to even get a radio call out. And for planes flying low, maybe the methane interferes with engines or air density. It's less clear for aircraft, but that's the idea.
And we know these methane releases happen.
Oh yeah, methane seeps are known geological phenomena. But the tricky part is proving that a massive sudden release happened at the exact right time and place to sink, say, the Cyclops or swallow Flight 19.
So it's plausible physics, but the direct link to the triangle disappearances is speculative.
Pretty much. It's a theory that works on paper, but finding concrete evidence tying it to these specific incidents is the challenge. It remains debated.
Okay. Then there's that story about electronic fog. The pilot, Bruce Gernon, that sounds way out there.
It definitely leans into the more unconventional side of things.
Yeah.
Gernon described flying through this really bizarre tunnel-like cloud.
It's a cloud.
Yeah, but he called it electronic fog. Said his instruments went crazy, compass spinning, electronics failing.
Yeah.
And the weirdest part, he claimed he experienced some kind of time distortion, flew a distance that should have taken much longer in way less time.
Whoa, like a time warp or something.
That's essentially what the story suggests, a possible distortion of space or time within this weird fog. It's a very compelling narrative, for sure.
But it's just one guy's account, right?
Yeah.
Not something widespread or verified.
Exactly. It's a fascinating anecdote, and it fuels those more speculative theories about portals or anomalies. But from a scientific standpoint, it's an isolated, uncorroborated experience. It highlights how we sometimes look for extraordinary answers, but it's not, established science.
Right. Okay, moving back to more grounded factors. The Gulf Stream. That's a real thing, and it flows right through there.
Absolutely critical factor. The Gulf Stream is like a massive, fast-moving river within the ocean. It runs straight through the triangle area.
And it's powerful.
Incredibly powerful, very strong currents. It can change direction, and it can spawn sudden, really violent weather systems. Thunderstorms, waterspouts, rogue waves, they can pop up very quickly.
So just navigating it can be treacherous.
Definitely, for smaller vessels especially, but even larger ones can get into trouble with its currents and the weather it generates. It's a naturally hazardous stretch of water in many ways.
And you also mentioned the deep trenches in the area, like the Puerto Rico Trench.
Yeah, that's another key geographical feature. The Puerto Rico Trench is the deepest part of the Atlantic Ocean. Extremely deep.
So if something did sink there,
good luck finding it. Recovering wreckage from those depths is incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible, even with modern tech. So things could sink due to perfectly natural causes, but because they sink in these trenches, they vanish without a trace, adding to the mystery.
Makes sense. What about plain old human error? We talked about the compass issue near Flight 19.
Huge potential factor, especially disorientation. There's this specific thing in the triangle area called magnetic variation. Basically the difference between where your compass points, magnetic north, and true geographic north. In most places, there's a noticeable difference you have to correct for.
Right.
But in parts of the triangle, magnetic north and true north line up very closely, or did historically. The lines are called agonic lines.
So less correction needed.
Yeah.
Sounds easier.
You'd think so, but it can actually be confusing if you're not expecting it or if your charts aren't precise. A small error, misreading a compass, not accounting for the lack of variation properly. It could send you way off course without realizing it until it's too late.
Especially before GPS and modern nav systems.
Exactly. While modern tech helps a lot, that potential for human navigational error, especially in stressful situations or bad weather, combined with that magnetic anomaly, could certainly explain some incidents.
Okay, so those are the more sort of natural or technical explanations. Then we get into the really imaginative stuff. Portals. Wormholes.
Yeah, these ideas pop up, borrowing from, theoretical physics and science fiction, the idea that maybe there are rips in space-time or natural wormholes and ships or planes just accidentally stumble into them.
I'd end up where? Another dimension, another time.
Who knows? That's the idea. Instantly transported somewhere else entirely. It's a fascinating concept, plays into that sense of complete disappearance.
But zero evidence for this actually happening, right?
Right. It remains purely theoretical, firmly in the realm of speculation and sci-fi tropes, no scientific basis for it explaining the Bermuda Triangle.
And the aliens theory.
Yeah.
That they're just grabbing ships and planes.
That's another popular one, yeah. Extraterrestrial abduction. Maybe they're studying us, maybe they need resources, maybe it's something else we can't comprehend.
Any particular reason they choose the Bermuda Triangle?
Sometimes people connect it to other supposed mystery spots, like the Dragon's Triangle near Japan. The idea being maybe these are entry or exit points for UFOs. Again, totally speculative, but it taps into that whole UFO phenomenon interest.
And then there's Atlantis, the lost city being down there.
Yes, the Atlantis connection. The theory goes that the legendary lost city of Atlantis is located somewhere beneath the triangle.
And its ancient, powerful technology is still active somehow, messing with ships and planes.
That's the gist of it. Maybe energy crystals or some kind of advanced tech left over is causing interference, malfunctions, or even destruction. People sometimes point to things found on the seabed as evidence.
Like that Bimini Road thing, near the Bahamas.
Exactly. The Bimini Road is often cited. It looks like paving stones or a wall underwater. Some claim it's man-made, part of Atlantis.
But scientists mostly say it's natural, right?
Yeah. The overwhelming geological consensus is that it's a natural formation called beach rock. Layers of sediment that cemented together. So it highlights that split, seeing evidence and interpreting it very differently based on whether you're looking for Atlantis or looking at geology.
It does seem like there's this real human pull towards the extraordinary explanation, doesn't it? Especially when things are tragic and unexplained.
I think that's a really insightful point. Facing loss without answers is hard. Our minds want to fill that gap, and sometimes a grand, mysterious explanation feels more satisfying, maybe, than just bad luck or unknown mechanical failure.
But then you look at the statistics. The Coast Guard, researchers, they often say the triangle isn't actually that dangerous, statistically speaking.
This is probably the single biggest counter-argument to the whole mystery narrative. You have to remember, the Bermuda Triangle is a very heavily trafficked area. Lots of ships, lots of planes, lots of private boats and aircraft pass through constantly.
Right. Miami, routes to the Caribbean, South America, Europe.
Exactly. So just based on the sheer volume of activity, you are going to have accidents. You're going to have disappearances. Statistically, the number of incidents might not actually be disproportionately high compared to other busy ocean areas.
So the takeaway isn't necessarily weird forces, but just more chances for things to go wrong because more things are there.
That's the argument. It's a numbers game. Correlation things disappear there doesn't automatically mean causation by some mysterious force specific to that location.
Didn't one source say the Weather Channel even looked into it and didn't find it exceptionally dangerous?
Yeah, that analysis suggested it doesn't rank among the world's most perilous waters for shipping based purely on weather and incident data, which kind of undermines the uniquely deadly reputation.
And many of the famous cases did happen during bad weather, even if that gets downplayed sometimes, like the Cyclops.
Very possibly. While its exact fate is unknown, it sailed into a region where severe storms are known to occur. Losing a heavily laden ship in a major storm is, tragically, not uncommon. It's a powerful, natural explanation that fits the known hazards.
So maybe the legend got amplified more by good storytelling.
I think that's undeniable. That book you mentioned earlier, The Bermuda Triangle by Charles Berlitz in the 70s, it was a phenomenon.
Huge bestseller.
Absolutely massive. It took these scattered incidents, wove them into this compelling narrative of deep mystery, and just fired up the public imagination. The story became incredibly powerful, maybe even more powerful than the verifiable facts sometimes.
And even now, when something happens there, like that cargo ship El Faro in 2015.
Right. The El Faro sank during Hurricane Joaquin. A terrible tragedy, but the cause, a massive hurricane, was known.
But because it happened in the Triangle.
It gets folded into the myth by some. It reinforces the idea in their minds. Even though there's a clear, natural explanation, it really shows confirmation bias at work.
Yeah, you see what you expect to see or what fits the story you already believe.
Exactly. Once that mysterious triangle idea is planted, you tend to notice and remember the incidents that fit and maybe downplay the ones that don't, or the perfectly normal crossings that happen every day.
And there's even, like, a tourism angle to it sometimes. In Bermuda or Florida.
Sure, a little bit. You'll see tours or souvenirs that play on the mystery. The legend itself has become a bit of a commodity.
We also touched briefly on cases slightly outside the main triangle, but often get lumped in, like the USS Scorpion, the submarine.
Yeah, the Scorpion sank near the Azores in '68, technically outside the usual triangle boundaries, but it was a nuclear submarine, lost with all 99 hands, and the exact cause is still debated. Was it a faulty torpedo, mechanical failure, Soviet action?
So that uncertainty connects it to the broader theme of unexplained maritime disasters.
Precisely. It taps into that same fear of the deep and the unknown, even if the geography isn't quite the same.
And that other one, the Carroll A Deering, the ghost ship.
Ah, the Deering. Off North Carolina in 1921, also just outside the triangle proper, but what a story.
What's so weird about it?
The ship itself was found aground, sails set, perfectly intact. Food was apparently laid out in the galley, ready to be eaten, but the entire crew, gone, vanished.
Empty.
Completely empty, no sign of struggle, logbooks missing. Theories flew piracy, mutiny, maybe involvement with rum runners during Prohibition. But despite Coast Guard and even FBI investigations, no one ever figured out what happened to the crew.
Wow. Cases like that, an intact vessel but no people, that really fuels the stranger theories, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's much harder to explain away with storms or simple sinking. That kind of Mary Celeste scenario is prime fodder for supernatural or paranormal speculation.
So with all these stories swirling around, what's the official take from groups like the Coast Guard or NOAA? Do they recognize the triangle as special?
Not really, no. Their official position, based on the data they have, is pretty straightforward. They don't recognize the Bermuda Triangle as a uniquely hazardous area compared to anywhere else with similar traffic and weather patterns.
So they attribute incidents to?
The usual suspects, basically. Natural causes, storms, currents, rogue waves, navigational challenges, and unfortunately human error. The known, documented perils of sea and air travel.
Which seems more plausible when you think about just how little of the ocean we've actually explored.
That's a huge point. Something like 95% of the world's oceans remain unexplored, unmapped, unobserved. The deep ocean is still, in many ways, a bigger mystery than space.
So things disappearing without explanation isn't maybe that surprising given the environment.
Exactly. The sheer vastness and the power of the ocean itself can easily account for why some wrecks are never found, why some mysteries remain unsolved without needing to invoke anything beyond natural phenomena or accidents.
It feels like the whole Bermuda Triangle thing, maybe it taps into a really deep human fear, the fear of the unknown, the fear of just vanishing completely. Especially now when we feel like everything is tracked and monitored.
I think you're right. In our hyper-connected world, the idea that a large ship or plane can just disappear without a definitive trace is profoundly unsettling. It connects to that basic human fascination with unsolved mysteries, with missing persons cases that need to know what happened.
It reminds me a bit of MH370, the Malaysia Airlines flight.
That's a really relevant comparison.
Totally different part of the world, the Indian Ocean. But a huge modern jet vanishes. Years later, still so many questions.
Exactly. MH370 showed us that even with modern technology in the vastness of the ocean, complete disappearance without immediate explanation is still possible. It reinforces that you don't necessarily need a supernatural triangle for such mysteries to occur. The planet itself is big enough and challenging enough.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, we've gone through the history, the theories, the skepticism. Where do we land? Genuine mystery zone or more? Legend than reality?
I think the most likely conclusion is that it's a blend. You have some genuinely puzzling older cases, especially the abandoned ships, that still lack easy answers.
Right.
But overall, the weight of evidence points towards a combination of factors. Known natural hazards like the Gulf Stream and sudden storms, the statistical likelihood of incidents in a very busy area, inevitable human error, and the difficulty of finding wreckage in deep water.
And layered on top of all that, really compelling storytelling.
Absolutely crucial. The narrative, the myth-making, particularly from the 70s onwards, has played a massive role in cementing the Bermuda Triangle in our minds as something uniquely sinister, perhaps beyond what the raw data suggests.
Still, it captures the imagination, doesn't it? That fascination with the unknown.
It really does, and maybe that's the enduring value. Mysteries like the Bermuda Triangle, even if largely explainable, push us to think about the limits of our knowledge and the power of nature.
So the final thought to leave people with.
Maybe just this. Despite everything we do know, our planet, especially its oceans, is still vast and holds real mysteries. The Bermuda Triangle legend reminds us that even in a world striving for complete understanding, the potential for the truly unexplained, the genuinely surprising, still exists. It makes you wonder, what else out there isn't quite as settled as we think?